Aldo, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Florence. I also see that my video has started now. If everyone is ready, I think we can commence.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And welcome to all the participants in this outstanding webinar co-hosted by RUForum and Wageningen University and Research on strengthening the role of African researchers in the Europe-Africa Research and Innovation Partnership on Food, Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture, or the long acronym LEAP FNSSA. I understand that almost 500 participants have registered for this webinar. We've counted from 49 countries. So we truly blessed with full participation. I think it also indicates the interest in this very important matter. Today's webinar is part of a range of events as part of RUForum's annual engagement, and specifically for activities around the annual general meeting. I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge the extraordinary leadership of Professor Adipala Ikwamu, the Executive Secretary of RUForum. Colleagues, as you would have seen from the marketing of this webinar for this afternoon, we're focusing on LEAP for FNSSA, or the Long-Term Europe-Africa Research Innovation Partnership for Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture. This extraordinary initiative is preceded by many prior to that, but one that I know well is called LEAP Agri. For LEAP, many others has been engaged with this, that brought together 30 partners from Africa and Europe, including 24 funding agencies like my own, to look at how this can support further collaboration and of course try and achieve the objectives of the newly conceptualized LEAP for FNSSA. I want to also acknowledge my senior colleague Prudence Makura from the National Research Foundation, who's joining us today. Allow me please to introduce an extraordinary group of people who will participate today. I'm very pleased to be able to moderate this on behalf of the consortium. My name is Aldo Strubel. I'm the Executive Director for Strategic Partnerships at South Africa's National Research Foundation. It is the National Science Granting Council. My graduate work has been completed at Ghent, Cornell, and Wageningen University, so very apt also for Wageningen's prominence in this initiative. And my field is sustainable agriculture. It's also my great pleasure to introduce to you our host of this webinar, Dr. Florence Nakayiwa. She's the Deputy Executive Secretary is responsible for planning, resources, mobilization, management at RUForum. Prior to joining RUForum, she was engaged at Makerere University and has many years of experience in the higher education sector in Africa. We have three panelists that will engage all participants not only on the initiative, but focus specifically on how we can bring African research institutions and their researchers closer to participate and be much more active in this platform. I know all of them very well, and it's really my pleasure to see all of you in your participation for today. The first person, Ms. Ninka Buysman, is currently the head of Unit of International Cooperation in the European Commission, under the Directorate General Research and Innovation. She leads the development and implementation of the EU's research and innovation cooperation policy with Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Ninka, we're very happy to welcome you to this panel. Secondly, the very well-known Dr. Irene Anor Frempong, who serves as an advisor on research and innovation to the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, or FARA. Prior to joining FARA, she worked at numerous universities and research institutes in Africa and Europe. Irene, really wonderful to have you participate this afternoon. And of course, Dr. Philippe Petit-Guenin is the Deputy Director of Research and Strategy at the French Agricultural Research Center for International Development, or CIRAD, and also the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project, LEAP for FNSSA. He's been working in the field of agricultural research for development for over 30 years, including 20 years of postings in both Africa and Latin America. Also very much engaged with the European Commission, previously also postings with INRA and the CGR group. We're very pleased also then, colleagues, to welcome the guest speaker from Wageningen University, Ms. Jenny van der Meen. Jenny is well known in her role as Liaison Officer for Africa at Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. She plays a very strategic facilitative role, and this has been enabled by many years living and working on the African continent for inter alia, the FAO, IFAD, and the World Bank. Jenny, it's really also wonderful to have you then as our guest speaker for today, and a very special word of welcome then to all the panelists. Colleagues, the session has various objectives, and both Jenny and Florence will speak to that. But as mentioned initially, in the context of this extraordinary, large, multimodal, multi-partnership, we want to try and engage and solicit your views and suggestions on specifically how African research institutions, including universities and their researchers, can effectively engage and participate, and especially benefit from this extraordinary platform. So as you would have seen the program for today, we will be introduced to various components of this platform and its evolution and current state, and conclude this with an open facilitated discussion to bring in these suggestions. We must also keep in mind the context, and I am very sure, especially Ninka and Philippe will refer to that many of these initiatives are also guided by the African Union, European Union, high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation, which was established in 2010 already. And subsequently, the roadmap that is jointly funded between the EU, Africa Research Innovation Partnership on Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture was launched in 2016. This is therefore a very important engagement for us this afternoon. Lastly, before we continue, I'd very much like to acknowledge senior participants in this webinar, Dr. Patrick Okori from ICRISAT, based in Malawi, Professor Kay Laresh, former and senior advisor to RU Forum, Professor Akenga, the Vice Chancellor of Eldoret University in Kenya, and of course, Professor Simpson, the former Vice Chancellor of Abomey Kalavi University in Benin. And of course, the very outstanding and strategic support by Mr. Emmanuel Okalani, Technical Specialist for Development and Partnerships at RU Forum. Colleagues, as you have seen from the landing slide, please be aware of the translation option that is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It is important to choose at least one language in order for you to be heard and for the interpreters to be able to interpret effectively. And lastly, also just a reminder to the speakers to kindly keep to the time allocated to provide adequate participation for everyone. With that said, welcome again. Really my honor to moderate this session today. And I'd like to introduce then Jenny van der Meen from Wageningen University and Research for first comments, followed by Dr. Florence Nakayiwa from RU Forum. Jenny, thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, I guess that's a yes, you can hear me. Thank you very much, Aldo, and thank you very much, all participants. It's wonderful to see that so many of you have taken the time to join us today for this webinar that will discuss the role of African researchers in the Europe-Africa Research and Innovation Partnership on food, nutrition security, and sustainable agriculture. I will use the abbreviation from now on, FNSSA, as it's much easier. Africa and Europe, as you all know, have had a long partnership, and the two continents have been closely collaborating on issues that are a concern to all of us, such as climate change, global security, and sustainable development. The priority areas of such cooperation are defined in multi-annual roadmaps. Expert groups from both continents have been established to oversee and provide technical and political guidance for the implementation of these roadmaps and action plans. As Aldo already mentioned in his introduction, today we will focus on the roadmap that discusses food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. This roadmap provides a framework for improved coordination of research and innovation policies, programs, and funding mechanisms. This afternoon, you will hear contribution from Europe and Africa on the background of this research and innovation partnership and its importance to both continents. The Leap for FNSSA project was developed by 35 partners from Europe and Africa, with the ultimate aim to develop a bi-continental platform that brings together African and European stakeholders who are interested in contributing to the research and innovation domain to benefit both continents. The coordinator of the Leap for FNSSA project will share more details with us on this topic. Now, for such a bi-continental platform to be successful, equitable participation of research institutions and researchers from both continents is required. Today, as part of RUForum's annual general meeting, the Leap for FNSSA project reaches out specifically to the African research community as a very important stakeholder group of this future platform. The purpose of today's event is, Aldo already mentioned it, but I would like to repeat as it is important, to firstly share information on the African-European Research and Innovation Partnership on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. And this is with the aim to explore opportunities for coordinated engagement of the African universities and research institutions to contribute to the development and implementation of the future platform. I wish you, or rather all of us, a very fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Jenny, thank you very much for the context that you've provided and the warm welcome. We certainly see Wageningen University and Research and your personal and professional participation in both the event and the platform as very important. Thank you indeed. Colleagues, please welcome Dr. Florence Nakayiwa, the Deputy Secretary, Executive Secretary of RUForum.
Thank you very much, Aldo, and thank you very much, Jenny, for those opening remarks. And I want to welcome all of you to this webinar that is looking at this partnership and how research universities and research institutions on the continent can partner to look for evidence that can guide policies that we have on the continent. This webinar, as Aldo already said, is part of the RUForum annual general meeting, and we've been at this dialogue for the past 2 months. And you well know that if it wasn't for COVID, we would have been in Morocco discussing this, but here we are discussing this partnership, the Africa-Europe partnership for research. And I'm happy, as Jenny said, that we'll be talking about LEAP for FSSNA, which is really the partnership for food security and nutrition. And we welcome you as RUFORUM to this discussion. We know that this dialogue today is one of those that promote this partnership between Europe and Africa, but also the partnership between research institutions and for research institutions to facilitate development and to explore potential for engagement between policymakers and research institutions. And we are blessed that we have the EU, we have the AU, and we have FARA in the panelists to give us, to kickstart the process so that we can promote the dialogue. At RUFORUM, we know that we'll keep this candle burning, and we welcome you to be here with us. Please feel free to be open and discuss issues that will promote this partnership. We look forward to your active engagement. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Nienke, thank you Irene, thank you Felipe, thank you Jenny, and thank you Aldo for agreeing to lead this discussion. I know that with your excellent facilitation, we should be able to pick the real issues that need to be taken forward. Please feel free to be here, feel free to make a contribution and use the processes that we have put down. Let me also use this opportunity to invite you to the Food as a Force webinar that is taking place on the 24th of November 2020. Still, this is in partnership with Wageningen, which is our who is our co-host for this webinar that we are having here, and EFAD and LEAP for FSNSA, which will be in preparation for the food summit that is taking place in 2021. Please feel at home and welcome to the webinar. Thank you very much, Aldo. Back to you.
Florence, thank you indeed, and some kind words. But I think very importantly and strategically, the reminder of the policy link that we would be looking for also to create an enabling environment to advance participation. Thank you indeed. Dear participants, we will start now formally with the panelists' input. And as introduced, Ms. Nienke Buysman, the head of Unit for International Cooperation at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, who will provide background and context to the FNSSA endeavor. Nienke, you are very welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Aldo. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the connection is not so stable this morning. Thank you very much for the introduction, Aldo, and it's very nice to see you online again. Okay, I hope it's fine. So some of you I know very well, Irene, Philippe, Jenny, as universities across Africa in the field of agriculture research. And I know that you work closely with the African Union and its commission, so it's great to be here today. And I have been asked to set a little bit the policy context, the cooperation context behind the project, behind the partnership. As Aldo already said, it is the cooperation is organized through the high-level policy dialogue on science and technology and innovation, which exists between the African Union and the European Union already since 2010. And we use this platform really to exchange on research and innovation policy, but we also formulate and implement priorities together. So I think this is a really good example of a true partnership as well. And we work very closely with the Department of Science and Technology at the African Union Commission. But also I'm chairing, for example, the administrative body of this policy dialogue with Mr. James Kazigwa, who is the director in the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation in Uganda. Let me just move this up. So I just also wanted to mention again that in this EU-AU cooperation, research and innovation is very high on the political agenda at the moment on both sides. And not only as a result of the current health crisis, but this obviously has made it very evident and important. The EU on its side released a new strategy with the African Union earlier this year. And for example, in July, we organized the first ever EU-AU ministerial meeting where research and innovation ministers on both sides came together. And there we really discussed on policies, priorities to help in the post-corona recovery. And we established 4 pillars of cooperation for the next couple of years, which are public health, the green transition, under which this partnership on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture falls, but also climate change and sustainable energy. It's one of the other partnerships we have. The 3rd pillar is on innovation and technology, where we are piloting an innovation partnership between both continents, and I will say a little bit more about that in a minute. And the 4th pillar for the next couple of years is capacity for science. And there we're regrouping the issue of evidence-based policy making, mobility of researchers, open science, and gender, very important. So let me say a few words about this pilot Africa-Europe Innovation Partnership, because it's really, we launched this last year and it's a very bottom-up initiative. It has already resulted in 30 tech hub partnerships and building a promising network of more than 900 innovation actors, entrepreneurs and agents of innovation over 75 countries in Europe and Africa. And over 200 network members have already benefited from capacity upgrading activities and everything. If you like to look into it, there is a website, the AEIP, Africa Europe Innovation Partnership website, where you can find it all. It really is a bottom-up initiative and has proliferated a lot. As you see, many partners are engaging. And we're very happy to announce that we will launch the follow-up of this project early next year. Let me now turn to the research and innovation partnership on FNSSA. I will also just use the abbreviation because you know it very well. As said before, it was we established this in 2016, and it was confirmed by the summit between the African Union and European Union 1 year later. And it's really based on a 10-year roadmap that we, with the help of experts on both sides, developed together. And it's a 10-year roadmap with 4 priorities. The number 1 is sustainable intensification. The second one is agriculture and food systems for nutrition. The third one is expansion and improvement of agricultural trade and markets. And then there is a fourth pillar on cross-cutting topics such as innovation. And this partnership is implemented through different tools. One of the tools is the European Union's Research and Innovation Program, Horizon 2020, but also the development funding that is implementing big programs such as DESIRA and the African Union research grants managed by the African Union Commission. In total, we have invested almost 400 million euros in this partnership, and it's really like a common pot of money. We're really investing in this all together, both commissions and the member states on both sides. So I would like to mention an example. Some may know this project, which I think is financed from Horizon 2020, the In of Africa, which developed a knowledge platform called Village Knowledge Centers, connecting farmers and rural communities through smartphones for faster and effective information and knowledge flow. And this project brought together partners from Kenya, Ethiopia, Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, and several organizations on the European side as well. So in July, as I said already, we had the ministerial, and this partnership on FNSSA was very much appreciated because it's one of the most mature ones in our, let's say, in our policy dialogue, in our cooperation. And ministers urged for more international R&I cooperation between the EU and the AU. Firstly, to accelerate information gathering and exchange. Secondly, to initiate target-oriented research and innovation activities. And thirdly, to reduce time to market, the uptake of research results. So yes, as I said before, the corona crisis has put research and innovation very high on the political agenda again. Policies are being developed based on scientific data and advice. And in addition, we have also never seen such a great public interest in science. So we believe that we should really use this momentum. So to conclude, this research and innovation partnership on FNSSA between the EU and the AU is really a flagship partnership, well advanced joint projects. I was quite interested to see the recent database of this partnership with more than, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 400 different projects. It's really the most mature of our collaboration. And I would like to finish off with three main challenges. First of all, we really think that we should communicate more on the success stories of this partnership. It's rather complex, this partnership, many different players, many different stakeholders, many different projects. But we need these success stories to make the case for intensified research and innovation cooperation between both continents, to make the case inside our institutions, but also outside the general public. So on our side, within this dialogue, we are now developing a new platform here, which we like to call a one-stop shop of all the information. But it's also a call to those of you being a stakeholder in this partnership to look for the success stories and talk about the success stories. Secondly, the second challenge is how we will be able to bring the research results communities. So on the European Commission side, we are at the moment looking into exploring an investment strategy. How can we become better at supporting the uptake of research results, perhaps supporting follow-up projects in this domain? But we are really at the beginning of our reflections. And thirdly, what is our plan for the future? You may know that Horizon Europe will be the new research and innovation program, a 7-year program that will start early next year. If we have agreement on the budget, it's the successor to Horizon 2020. I think Jenny also referred to it. We really need to build on what has been done so far in this partnership and build a sustainable platform or consortium where all the projects are coming together. I remember a couple of years ago when I wasn't leading the department yet, I was responsible for the cooperation with Africa as a policy officer, and we already talked about it, that this possible international research consortium would really be a very nice, sustainable platform for the future. A strong network to share results, bringing the partners together, really to avoid fragmentation. And I think this is a big challenge, but it's a very nice challenge. And finally, in terms of how we will or how we are thinking to use this new program, Horizon Europe, that starts next year, we are planning to launch in the first work program a transversal Africa initiative that is really going to launch calls focused on the 4 priority pillars of our cooperation that I just mentioned, really showing that we're taking the cooperation in research and innovation with Africa very seriously, also in our funding program, Horizon Europe. So we are much looking forward to launching this next year. I think that's the end of my intervention. I look forward to listening to you, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much, Aldo.
Inke, thank you very much indeed, as concise and strategic as always. A very important number of aspects that you have raised. Certainly an extremely positive movement under the framework of Horizon Europe next year with a specific focus on Africa. We've seen the increase in the trajectory between the different framework programs, focus on engagement, and it really is very strategic to see the specific focus on Africa. Colleagues, this provided then a framework on the initiative, how this is contextualized within the EU's programming, but very importantly also the challenges that Ninke has indicated that I think will directly affect the discussion that we'll have a little bit later. Ninke, thank you very much again. Colleagues, I now introduce Dr. Irene Anor Frempong from the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, who will provide slightly deeper engagement focusing on the importance of the AU-EU Research Innovation Partnership, FNSSSA, to the African community. Irene, excellent to see you again. You are very welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator. I am pleased to see you. Haven't seen you for quite some time.
Too long.
And I'm pleased to be part of this important webinar and part of the Forum AGM. I will speak on 5 key areas. I'll probably give a context and then touch on the challenges facing the African research community. I think many of us are fully aware of these. I will then look a little bit at the implementation of the FNSSA in different contexts, and then look at what we have in Africa. What do we have in terms of capacities, institutions, and partnerships, and draw a few conclusions highlighting on some key issues. So as we heard from Ninke, the partnership between the EU and AU has been long, but now it's been changing. And the new cooperation is increasingly seeking common priorities to help the partnership between the EU and AU. And this time round, it doesn't look at Africa as a recipient, but it looks at Africa as a partner that contributes to the formulation and execution of the project or programs. But of course, it has advantages. We still have issues that remain, issues of duplication, as Ninke mentioned, issues of fragmentation. We still have huge issues around lack of coherence of what we do. And therefore, the efficiency and returns on investment still remain as we speak. And we will delve a little bit into that. The EU-AU FNSSA platform, of course, gives us a good example of how we can overcome a number of these challenges, and of course also improve previous underachievements, even though we still grapple with a number of these key challenges. Of course, the point we make is that the capacities and R&D institutions, as well as frameworks, do exist in Africa, and it should therefore provide the basis for strengthening the role of the African research community in this partnership. So we do not come from a point where there is nothing to offer. We do have some or quite a bit of contribution to make. And so we see this partnership as a useful one, and that's one that Africa can benefit huge from. So let's look a little bit at the challenges. And I think, as I said, many of us, we know the issue of fragmentation. Usually we talk of the Africa's small country problem, and of course a small NAS problem. I will indicate that shortly. And also the fact that the research capacities on the continent at individual, institutional, and systemic levels are all compromised to a point that what we do seem to be duplicating, and we are not able to add up our efforts, particularly on STI, to show at national or continental level what we do to elicit the necessary investments. We struggle when we go beyond individual efforts to look at partnerships between groups. So research groups, we have a few on the continent that are agile enough to respond effectively. We struggle with partnerships across borders, and we also struggle to share data and exchange and management of such data. So we keep repeating ourselves on areas that we may have covered already. We have huge prioritization problems stemming from national processes that should lead to priorities that carry the voice of the small scale farmer. Oftentimes, by the time we get to national level, the voice of the small scale farmer is missing, is lost. And of course, we articulate our priorities based on what the academic or the scientists feel are priorities for the governments. And so we need to look at that seriously. We also, because of the fragmentation, we have issues of coherence. How do we draw synergies across different teams, and how do we build on what we do in order to have accountabilities at national level to show what the essence of STI work that we do. And of course, the other bigger challenging area is one of long-term sustainable funding. And all these put together then compromise the efficiency at which we work, and of course the returns on the investment that we can make when it comes to research. Now, this I have taken from the recent biennial review that actually tracks investments in Africa. In 2017, 3 years ago, when the biennial review took the data, you see the scores on the left-hand side. For investment, the score was 1.72. That meant that we had a few countries that were on track. About 3 countries were on track. That means above the benchmark for the BR in 2017. Now, surprisingly, in 2019, when the binary review data was collected, the situation had grown worse. And even though the score was 2.06, we had just virtually just one country being on track, which is on the right-hand side. So this is just to point that even though we know the issues of funding is important, and I think 10, 15 years ago, CADAP had been on and we had set targets at Maputo and targets at Malabo, we still are struggling with domestic investments into agriculture in general, and of course, even worse, into agricultural research. Again, I touched on the fragmentation of the continent. This just to highlight the enormity of the problem. We have many countries, very many, 31, have very small markets. Per capita is very low. We're more than 70% with very small NAS. Means that we tend to not enjoy economies of scale at all, and we are not able to make that impact. So the point we are making here is this: Africa's problem is peculiar. The fragmentation requires a regional integration and coordination of research if agricultural research is to contribute to agricultural transformation. So this is a key point that I want to make in this discussion. So we need to really work our way through collective actions. And therefore this FNSSA partnership is one that we see as very important. We actually hailed the adoption of the FNSSA in 2016, as Ninka mentioned, and that came, of course, with funding directed to a number of projects under Horizon 2020, but also the AU research grants. Ninka had articulated the 4 key areas, so I think I'll move on. But the point that is important to us is the basis for a common research agenda was new, and is really useful to Africa in terms of articulating the relevance of our priorities within the African Union in relation to the EU. And secondly, also knowing that research contributes to solutions and evidence for the policy change we are looking for, and of course for food security and nutrition and natural resource management. We also see from the FNSSA the importance of joint research, Africa and Europe, providing a level of capacity that helps to transform agriculture in Africa, and also it supports to working on scalability of research and innovation, of course, driving towards getting the impact at regional and continental level. Of course, the complementarity that we get because of bilateral and multilateral collaboration came with the FNSSA as well. Now, this slide very quickly shows that the dynamics are changing, where if you look at the Africa side, the thematic areas under the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, CADAP, that highlights 2 key objectives: transforming agriculture and sustaining inclusive growth. And secondly, strengthening systemic capacity to implement and deliver results. Has been these objectives have been important to a number of the frameworks that we have. If we look at the STISA, the STI strategy for Africa, we highlight the priority 1 of that STISA on eradication of hunger and achieving food security. This is a priority that RUFORUM itself is lead institution driving, together with a number of other institutions. And you can see that it links directly also to the priority areas that were identified within the science agenda 4 key areas and 3 cross-cutting areas. More important point is to see how all these frameworks we have in Africa actually contributed to the EU-AU Research and Innovation Partnership on FNSSA. The 3 priority areas that were mentioned by Ninke, together with the cross-cutting, actually you can see its alignment with the science agenda, with the STISA, and also with CADAP. And together, of course, contributing to the Agenda 2063. Now, so colleagues, the point we are making is this, that when it comes to Africa, at least a certain level of alignment of frameworks at continental level has been achieved. And that, you know, oscillates around our Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and which we hope is contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. So when we look at the right-hand side, we see that the AU-EU partnership contributes substantially to the SDGs, as well as to the Agenda 2063, and of course, to the other. And below that is, of course, the Live for FNSSA that we are currently talking about. So at the continental level, we have a good level of alignment of these frameworks. What becomes the issue now is at the country level. How do we get all these programs at the country level to also be aligned and well coordinated in order to contribute to national, regional, and continental agendas? And that's where, again, we see the partnership helping to contribute. So quickly to look at the implementation of the FNSSA partnership, I think a number of studies have been done. The FNSSA working group, the MNE has also been done at some point, and we have a lot of information on the implementation. We have quite a number of projects that are being implemented in line with the FNSSA, 205 with 129 ongoing. And this we have taken from the Live for FNSSA database. So we have quite a number of topics, and this map has been called to show the intensity of the projects across the countries. And you see, you know, in a few countries, we have over 27 projects, South Africa, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and a few others, whilst others also have very few. So the thing is that across the continent, we need to pay attention to where the projects are and how it is aligned with national agendas, together with the issue of not just the geographic, but also Anglophone, Francophone divide, to ensure that we have projects being implemented to articulate the priorities of different countries across the continent. Again, the studies that have shown that the coordination and leadership of these projects can be improved. The more recent study led by ARC, I think under the Live for FNSSA, show that over 60% of these projects are led by Europe. And these are areas that we need to look at to strengthen the capacity of African institutions and of course researchers to be a part of the coordination or the leadership of these projects, including the Live for FNSSA project itself. The participation of the African research community could be much, much improved. Again, here we're making the point that in addition to the frameworks that exist that we have tried to align, we still also have institutions and researchers on the continent that could seriously be mobilized to participate in this partnership. We've called this from the FARA data informs that shows across board from Asareka, Kadesa, Koraf, and Nasru, institutions, research institutions, public universities, private universities, and colleges that we can mobilize, nearly over 1,900 of them on the continent that could be mobilized effectively to contribute to their national agendas and of course subsequently to the partnerships. Again, the architecture exists in Africa, fortunately because of the Comprehensive Africa Culture Development Program, and of course through earlier collaboration with Europe, a strong research architecture has been established from local level, national, sub-regional, regional to global levels. And so you will see that a lot of these institutions have grown over years. I mean, I will cite the example of Roof Forum, for instance, now is at the continental level and has moved to become a big platform of universities, over 100, getting to 150 universities being part of the fraternity. So we have the architecture, we have the institutions, we have the research community that could be mobilized and put together to drive this partnership. We also even have the pathways, and I set the example of the science agenda. There are a number of pathways that we already have in place that links up to CADAP to help us strengthen planning, prioritization, and implementation, pathways for strengthening coherence and for mainstreaming frameworks into national processes, pathways for and strategies for advocacy and instruments that will help us strengthen the science policy interface, and pathways for resource mobilization. And that's where the issue, I think, is. We need to have strategies for resource mobilization, and I'll touch on that when we go forward. And all these, of course, are underpinned by cross-cutting areas of partnerships, particularly multi-stakeholder partnerships for implementation, capacity to plan and implement, and influencing the international agenda, as of course Europe has given us opportunity to do. So yes, there are advantages of the EU-AU partnership.
I do apologize for interrupting.
I will conclude soon.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. We have advantages, and I think that has been cited by Ninke already. And then we have remaining challenges that we need to pay attention to. I think I'll go to the next slide to make the key points. The key points here that we make is that we need to make some shifts in order to deal with these challenges. And the shifts, we have different players that need to pay attention. Research community, yes, but governments, regional and continental bodies. There needs to be alignment of programs and projects to African, national and regional priorities. We need to strengthen the capacities for planning, prioritization and long-term implementation. And we need to facilitate equitable participation of the African research community in the these frameworks that we have built, and also improve the membership and leadership roles of the research community. We need to strengthen coordination at national level. Now, all these put together is nothing close to the last point that we make, that these shifts can happen if Africa itself develops an African financing strategy or strategies and mechanisms to implement all African frameworks and priorities. Why do I make this point? Because if you look at the EU financing mechanisms that we enjoy, that we are using to implement the FNSSA and the other R&I partnerships, each of the financing mechanisms are seriously backed by strategies of the EU. And therefore, as we take advantage of these financing mechanisms, we tend to lose focus of our own priorities as Africans, because virtually we are playing, even though we are looking at common priorities, we still are implementing these things without paying attention to our overall strategy that we have put in place, be it at Agenda 2063, CADAP, Science Agenda, or whatever. So what we are saying is this, that Africa needs to develop its own financing strategies that go with each of these frameworks. It could be a patchwork, that's not a problem, but we need to have that in order to have clarity from the local level, local researcher, through to the national level, through to regional and continental levels. So this is an important shift that we need to make. So a few conclusions. The institutions and frameworks to implement FNSSA and research and innovation platform exists. We need to strengthen coordination for research and innovation at national level, particularly to improve the coherence and avoid duplication. We need to strengthen the evidence-based advocacy, particularly to strengthen the science policy interface. And the important point here is to advocate to change the budget architecture in such a way that research and innovation is also supported at the domestic level, that domestic level financing is at least credible to support that. And we will talk a lot about that during the General Assembly. So I'll leave that. But I think this holds the key to the implementation of African priorities, remembering that our partnership with Europe helps us to only implement part of our priorities, not all of them. And we also engage with other international communities. And so we need to look at Africa as a whole, not just the part that works with Europe. It's the same Africa that works with America and the same Africa that works with Australia and all the other communities. So we have to look at Africa as a whole to drive this agenda forward. If there is a future bicontinental platform, as I think Philippe will be talking about, because that's what Leap for FNSSA is helping to develop, that bicontinental platform must have a strong program implementation component and a coordination mechanism that supports equitable participation of the African research community. These are areas that Africa itself needs to work hard to ensure that we are at the table and we are able to contribute effectively to the changes that we want to see in Africa. I thank you, Mr. Facilitator.
Dr. Anor from Frempong, thank you very much. A very strategic overview. A couple of things or components that stood out for me. Number one is the very important need to prioritize. I think you've demonstrated that well, not only with the data, but also with the strategic approach and the policy frameworks existing. And the second point on the policy frameworks is the extraordinary alignment that exists already. And this creates a very enabling framework within which to operate at that strategic policy level to bring the necessary funding and to engage for impact. And thirdly, the very important key shifts that you have illustrated that will truly be necessary for us to engage, to go further. Irene, thank you very much for your insight and strategic approach. Colleagues, the last formal input then from the panel, and he has been introduced, is from Dr. Philippe Petit to Gurnin. He is the coordinator of LEAP for FNSSA, but also formally engaged with CIRAT. And Philippe will assist us to look at efficient and coherent implementation mechanisms and the holistic approach of the platform towards implementation. Philippe, thank you very much for your participation.
Philippe is muted. He has to unmute.
Philippe, thank you. We can see your presentation. You can just unmute and go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present what LEAP for FNSSA is trying to do. But mostly also to reach out to this very large audience. This is important for us, and this is a great opportunity as we embark in building up this platform. It has to be really based on the good willingness of the maximum of institution, and I would really I really like the comments by Irene, trying also to mobilize the African community to also to engage in building up this platform. I will build on what has been already presented by Ninke and by Irene. So I will go through very quickly a number of slides that are mentioning the policy perspective, but go focus on the issue of the platform. So that I will just pass very quickly these slides if it allows me to. Is it moving to the next? So these. So I'll stop here. I hope you can all see this slide. So I think I just wanted to highlight this characteristic of the FNSA roadmap, which has been introduced by Nika and also mentioned by Irene. I think it's the pillars have been mentioned, but I think three main ideas need to be highlighted. The first one is this is not an aid program of Europe working to aid Africa. It is a balanced partnership between the two continents, which has got a number of consequences. One is that the research and innovation priorities must be of joint interest for both continents, for both citizens from Europe and Africa, and having impact on both continents. It also highlights the need to have joint funding, and here I would echo what Irene was advocating for. A difference also that the FN's roadmap makes is that it does propose to align and coordinate policies and programs for greater impact in both continents. It is a possibility, but that possibility has to be really utilized by the policymakers in all the countries. But it also provides this coherent framework. Irene was really highlighting the need that there is a coherent framework, but it has also to go down to the national level and how to approach all the different actors of the research and innovation process. And the challenge we have, I sometimes call it the triple bridge, is that yes, there is a policy process, but that policy process has to reach out to what's happening on the ground, to the research and innovation activities. So that's the first bridge between policy and action. The second bridge is, to bridge between the institution in Europe and in Africa. And the third one is make it work through all the stakeholders of the research innovation towards impact, so that their diversity of visions and expectation is taken on board, but always generate also an impact. So the idea of this platform, it really echo this triple bridge that we have to build up. And that's not a new idea. Nico was mentioning that he's been already mentioned a few years ago, but is probably coming now into being implemented through LIB5 and SSA very quickly. This is a 4-year project, and it has in it, I just want to show this slide, 35 partners from Europe and from Africa. I know there are many African institutions, African partners, colleagues who are attending this meeting, so please note down of all the institutions from Africa who are participating here. They could relay really the visions and the informations and the proposition that participants to this seminar would like to bring in. So the objective of the project, the legacy of the project, is to establish this sustainable structure or platform for the efficient and coherent implementation of the EU-AU partnership as described in the roadmap. So 3 characteristics: it is a bicontinental platform, Europe, Africa. It is supporting the FNSA roadmap and is linking this policy dialogue with the research activities. We've worked on what does it mean more precisely to have a platform doing all this. And it focused on this sentence, which I think is important to look at, because the aim is to reduce fragmentation, support interaction, and improve coordination. That has been very much highlighted by Irene already. But it needs to be built on these committed actors who are operational, who are ready to act on the ground, but are committed to those objectives and to implementing the FNSA roadmap. And that vision of an operational partnership of committed actors has led us also to embark on the proposal that this platform should be built on an international research consortium that was also already mentioned by Nienke. I just want to go very briefly here. What is an international research consortium? And that's the first element. It's a group of committed institutions. It includes research innovation institutions, but it's not limited to research innovation institutions. Committed institutions who agree formally to work together in the mid to the long term. I think the idea of long term is important, towards a commonly defined goal under a shared governance mechanism. And I think Irene was insisting on this strong coordination mechanism for equitable partnerships, so a shared governance mechanism, implementing activities commonly agreed, and mobilizing resources, not only funding, but also resources in kind, knowledge, infrastructures, idea carriers, innovators. All these resources can be mobilized, put at the disposal of the research consortium by these institutions, and towards implementing and making progress on the roadmap. IRC is not something new. There already exists a number of international research consortium, and that's one of the assets of this vision, is that there are well-known examples, and I've just mentioned here on this slide StarIDAS, and people can Google StarIDAS and go and look at it, see exactly what it is. It is less restricted than formal EC instrument like the Article 185 for the PRIMA partnership that you probably know about, but it's supported by the EC, but also supported by other funders. When we look at the existing example, we see that the model is attractive also for funders to invest or to channel their funding through those type of platforms. Of course, those are broad ideas, so it's flexible. What is important now is that how this platform is built, how it's designed, how its governance is being defined. It's up for the founders, for the institutions interested to decide. There are different options, and I think we have to go for something which is fairly simple, straightforward, that proves that it can work, and then from there it can evolve. But it has to be based on your inputs. So all institutions joining the IRC should be institutions who are looking for enhanced impact of their own activities through improved alignments, willing to contribute to the FNSA roadmap and work in the EU-AU dialogue, institutions who are mobilizing resources and also agreeing to this work plan and taking part of the activities. Very briefly, we are looking at this platform and mostly under 3 pillars, and they are here on this graph. Of course, it's linked to the policy dialogue. That's one of the roles of this platform, link policy dialogue to the activities on the ground. But it has mainly developed 3 pillars. One is the funding mechanisms. That's the key issues, and that Irene has highlighted. So new funding initiatives, channeling also funds coming from different sources. The second one is develop a knowledge management system for channeling informations. And I want to insist on this tailored information to the needs of the participant in the platform. Sometimes you have specific questions, and we're developing here some elements and a dialogue between stakeholders. So that's the vision of a platform that will be launched in 2 years, but we're already working on this. We're working on funding mechanism and the funding landscape, on the knowledge management system or information and communication system. There's a large database which has been developed by the project, so it's really feeding into the second pillar. Irene has mentioned it is a searchable database. You can access it through the project website, and I would invite everybody to have a look at it. And it's also linking to enabling a dialogue. I'm just coming out from an event which was about clustering project coordinators from a whole range of project coordinators, AU Research Grant, Horizon 2020, DevCo, Desira, and others who wants to work more together. And so, in a way, the platform will be officially launched in 2 years and launched by its founding institutions, but is already being built up. There's already activities being implemented, and that should also attract people to join in these efforts. Because I think that's my last message and my last slide is, this platform is here to serve the partnership between Europe and Africa. So we need to have your feedback from all these participants. So I'm delighted there are more than several hundreds of participants. I would really like to have the feedback. What are the expectations from such a platform? Maybe going more in depth on alliances of actors, knowledge and management system and funding, maybe other expectations. Are you interested to join in the platform design? If you do, then contact us. We want to build on your ideas. And maybe one way to do it, because there are a great diversity of actors here, would be also to rely on a number of the Apex organizations like Reforum, who are members of a project, but they can also already easily channel your information, collect your views, collect your ideas, and be your voice in the building up of this platform. With these viewers, I stop here and hand it back to you, Aldo, and thanks for facilitating this discussion.
Philippe, a great appreciation for the overview and framework that you have provided. Congratulations also, I think, are in order at this early stage of the implementation of this very, very complex but inclusive program. And certainly the opportunity framework that it provides can benefit everyone. Philippe, thank you very much. Colleagues, you have heard from 3 key speakers. Firstly, on the policy environment, the support from the European Commission, the trajectory of development that emanated in this program. Secondly, and very importantly, a framework of continental support, what it means for capacity development, the challenges, but certainly also the opportunities and work that has taken place as a collective, but also the networks, from the networks that supports these collaborative efforts. And thirdly, of course, the framework of this program, the opportunities that it provides, the complexity, but also the need that it addresses. And this provides the context for our open and facilitated discussion that will take place now. There are a number of comments that you have seen, both on the Q&A box, but also on the chat box. Please refer to those. With your permission, I'd like to allocate a specific question or set of questions that we have summarized thus far, both from the chats and the comments, to some of the panelists, just to get us started with their views and contributions. Ninka, heads up to you. A very important comment was made by Irene, indicating that in many cases the agenda are set by developed country partners, and she used an example of the EU. And it wasn't meant as a criticism. It simply stated a status quo in terms of information, developed systems, etc. But she also made the fundamental comment that Africa should provide its own strategy and also bring its own ideas. What would be your comment or advice, if you will, within this policy framework of how to strengthen decision-making, but also participation from African institutions and researchers?
Okay, let me just connect again. Sorry about this. Yes, no, I mean, I of course fully agree with what Irene said, and this is exactly the I think the thing we're trying to do with the high-level policy dialogue, really to have an inclusive approach at different levels and from both continents. So really, from the level of the ministerial, the ministers, all to the senior officials in the ministries. Okay, I have my daughter now joining me. Sorry, that's the beauty of webinars. And the in the different ministries, the commissions, and the stakeholders. So I think what was very nice to see in the ministerial meeting that there were far more African ministers than there were European ministers. We were, as the European Commission, less able to mobilize our member states as was the African Union Commission. So I think that was very a good sign of the interest on the African side of this policy dialogue. Then going down, let's say all the different levels of the cooperation, I think that even in the bureau we are very equal. I mean, there's the same number of member states on both sides. So perhaps where really the main issue is, and even if you look at all the projects, they're really large projects with research organizations on both sides. What I thought was very interesting in Irene's slides were that looking at the whole continent, that maybe there are more participants from specific countries in Africa than from others. So that's something we all together need to look at. And secondly, also in terms of the coordination of all these specific projects, where she was saying that 60% is still coordinated by EU research organizations. I think that we should also use the projects to build capacity, especially those where the funding is coming from the European Commission, Horizon Europe. I know our program is very complicated. The administrative rules are very complicated. So before you know everything a coordinator needs to do, it will take a while. So I think within these projects, we also need to work together on building this capacity of all the existing funding rules, etc. So that's maybe in a couple of years, we have at least 50% of coordination in these projects. I think 60% it's already or 40% is already a big improvement from several years ago. So yeah, what is my advice? My advice is really to even become more inclusive, to have also fora like this, speak about what is being done, involving those who are interested, deciding together, discussing together, linking to the priorities. Irene was saying that in African Union there is a specific policy context with priorities. In the EU, we also have our own priorities, of course, and we're also working on our own priorities. But within these joint priorities, it's really about talking, discussing, linking to both our policy context. And I don't know, I think I've been involved in this several years. I started, I think, in 2012, and I was just WhatsApping with Dan, who you know very well as well, to see that after so many years, we more or less have quite an equal involvement, and we can really call this a true partnership. So, thank you.
I think very well, valuable. Just as a side note, you can ask the young policy maker next to you to participate freely. Thank you. No, it's an important set of aspects that you raise. I do agree that equity among the policymakers certainly has improved tremendously over the past number of decades, and especially with the initiative and the structure, if you will, of the AU as it engaged with the EU. What I find sometimes a little challenging is that translational aspect, especially in Africa, from the policy to the implementers. And hence, programs like these are very important because it creates a level of participation in a quicker way that sometimes are somewhat elongated because there is a little bit of a challenge or a hold-up from the policy to the implementation. But it certainly is acknowledged the extraordinary efforts by both the AU and the EU, and as Irene has indicated with us, with data by the AU and how this contributes. Linked to this, and participants, this is one of the specific aspects that has been raised numerous times, is the notion of the capacity to build capacity, and referring specifically to early career or young researchers. Irene, I wonder if you can comment on specific strategies and the importance of this next generation of researchers. And we all understand its importance, but specifically how a platform like this can be engaged with established researchers to increase participation, and especially also the effectiveness of participation from Africa.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. That's, I think, the key question and area that we need to focus on. And that's where we are weak. You know, as I mentioned, we have all the higher level frameworks at continental and regional levels that are going on. They can be improved. But the more important thing is at the local level. How do we mobilize the researchers, and more importantly, the younger research scientists, knowing, of course, the age at which most of our current research scientists are at the moment. So in terms of strategy, how do we mobilize the younger or the youthful research scientists to be part of this through a number of programs? And I think Ninka also mentioned the Horizon Europe. That's also going to look at mobility. There's also a specific effort under the EU looking at education that I think we need to pay attention to, mobilize the young through exchange program, through mobility programs. Reform itself, I think, is in implementing one. How do we get the mentorship programs going on as effectively as possible, encouraging the youth to be in the STEM options? We have another program, the PASSET program that I sat on, trying to mobilize the youth to go into the STEM options, and actually engaging the youth to understand the developmental issues at the university level. This is where a major role needs to be played by the universities. How do we change or modify curriculum in such a way that the youth come face to face with development issues, not going through the entire undergraduate programs or even postgraduate program before they begin to look at developmental issues. That's a bit too late for them to begin to understand or even be innovative about what they can do. Because we know the youth are the biggest innovation cluster that Africa can rely on. So strategies around mobilizing and engaging the youth in that direction and how they can understand whatever they learn in science as linked to the development agendas of their individual countries. The context has always been the problem, the data to back the context for the youth to begin to understand. So emphasis on data, emphasis on context, emphasis on mobilizing the youth mobility programs, exchange programs, changing curricula to inform curriculum with development agenda right at the time that the youth can be innovative around these things. And of course, then they will be positioned when they sit in such platforms or when they are in research platforms that link Europe and Africa. They must know the African issues. They must know the context in order to participate effectively.
Irene, thank you. I agree. It's valuable aspects that you have raised, but I cannot help but wonder if the financing and support for next generation researchers are so forthcoming as it should be. All of us in our countries are perpetually under funding constraints, and the prioritization of science and research, agriculture for that matter, is usually not on par. And a very important component of that is, of course, this engagement of the next generation, investment for the future, etc. This context that you've mentioned and the great challenge of too little investment, I want to take further and question Philippe on perhaps his suggestions on what mechanisms could or would be made available to focus on the aspect of next generation researchers specifically. It is clearly understood that this is a research platform and enabling platform. Established researchers lead the way by virtue of their experience, but certainly this next step will be critically important. And the second aspect to that perhaps is how can institutions join? Is it a free engagement? Are there specific expectations? How would you bring these two components together?
Thank you, Aldo. And first, to address your first question, and I would like to make the link with the funding as well, which has been mentioned. I think there is some hope. I mean, I've been looking at this landscape for quite some time, and I do remember that the issue of capacity development, reform of university curricula 10 years ago was not very much in the forefront. And because relevant authors and people like Irene have mentioned it over and over, I think it has picked up. And just to give an example, on the French side, the Agence Française de Développement, the AFD, which is a development agency, is investing into university reform of curricula and vocational training. I mean, I do believe that also this idea of development of capacities should not also be limited to training scientists and doing PhD students. We need also to have, people who have a good secondary level educations into agriculture, into innovating in the food system. So that's the whole chain. So this was not the case a few years ago, and now it happens. There are investment, for instance, in Senegal, in the what we know in French as lycée agricole, but anyway, the vocational training. So, and another example is the Desira program. If you look at Desira, it didn't exist. Maybe Irene remember that a discussion around Desira starting during the Farah Science Week in Ghana, something like maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago about. And then it realized, and for instance, there are specific funding through Desira to support institutions like Farah and the SROs in their role as capacity development, institutional capacity development, but also a new project developing in West Africa on support to agricultural knowledge and innovation system and the capacities of individuals to support the systems. So I think that's a bright side. It's not sufficient, but I think we need to continue highlighting the need to invest in this domain. Probably we need to be better at talking to our colleagues from the Ministry of Education. There's a good alliance at the EU level between the research and the science department and the agricultural department. And I'm not sure when we talk about at the national level, there is so much discussion between the agricultural sector and the research and education sector. Probably happens in a number of countries, but not all of them. And I think that would be because the majority of the youth that will come on the job markets will have more opportunities in the agricultural sector broadly. Agricultural, food, rural development. This is a broad sector that can provide jobs. And I think we need, at the moment, we are not really training them to be efficient actor in the sector. So I would say let's continue advocating for it, convincing, showing good examples that some countries have done it, others may do it as well. So I think that's what I wanted to insist upon. But Dalo, I've forgotten you had the second questions.
Who and how can institutions join?
Yeah, I've responded in the chat, but the platform, at the moment we are designing this platform, and what is being planned is that first semester of 2021, I think a message